Hey everybody, Jason Blaha here with Ice Cream Fitness. Today I'd like to talk to you about the subject of how to set up a full body routine. I decided to do this topic because someone asked me about it in my training log on bodybuilding.com, and they asked me if I would try to do a video explaining how to properly set up a full body routine for intermediate trainees seeking primarily hypertrophy. And again, this is going to be a fairly in-depth video. I'm going to be using visual aids because it's going to be necessary to break it down. And one of the reasons it really takes a bit of complexity to really get into this is because novices, they don't need particularly complex routines. Anything focused around heavy compound movements, barbell work, and linear progressive overload will put large amounts of muscle on the novice trainee, someone with less than a year of consistent hard training. However, when you start getting to the intermediate phase, what you usually find is that linear gains are exhausted. You usually need some periodization. You have to do more frequent deloads. You sometimes have to reset the weight you're using more frequently. Um, you oftentimes have to incorporate mixed phase training, training in multiple rep types at the same time in order to get the most growth possible. So again, I want to go into a bit of in-depth detail and see if I can explain to you how to set this type of routine up and how to select your lifts, your rep ranges. And again, this is going to be primarily a 5x5 focus setup that I'm going to show you. Obviously, it's not the only way to do things, but again, I'm a fan of the 5x5 systems for hypertrophy. And so I'm going to show you how to set up a 3-day-a-week full body routine for intermediate trainees who are pursuing um, rapid and quick hypertrophy. Here, let me give you guys a bicep shot first. All right, and I'll get on to showing you how to set up the routine. Okay, let's jump into designing this routine. As you can see, I've got a board up here already with Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on it. And I apologize for my horrific handwriting. I will try to make this as legible as possible, but I can't make any promises. And as we organize these lifts, you're going to notice that I'm going to generally, unless there's a reason otherwise, prioritize them uh, from the heaviest lifts towards the lightest, biggest muscle groups to smallest. And I'm going to tend to start every workout with some sort of squat. And again, the reason for that being, in my opinion, the barbell squat is the king of mass building. It is the best mass building movement because between it and deadlifts and similar movements, while it might not work quite as many total muscle groups to their fullest as say a deadlift, it's less taxing on the central nervous system, and you can squat at a very high frequency and with a high volume and still recover from it. And so therefore, again, it takes a very high priority in your routine because it's great for just adding overall mass to your body. I mean, I don't necessarily say that the barbell squat is the king of quad movements, but it is the king of mass building. It will put a lot of meat on you very quickly if trained very, very hard. So starting on Monday, again, Monday because we're fresh, and our hypothetical trainee here has fully recovered from a full weekend off from training. Because again, you're training Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And so we're going to start with Monday, and it's going to be a heavy day. It's going to be a 5x5 day. And so we're going to go ahead and start off with squats. And I will write this whole routine out and post it up at the end so that you can see what exercises were selected and then look back over the way we made this selection. We'll just call it SQ for squat. And we will do 5 sets of 5. And generally for 5 sets of 5, and you're going to want to do sets across, and it's going to probably be with about 80% intensity. And again, the squat is an all-around great mass builder. Next, because again, we don't want to do anything that works the back again, because on this sort of system, we're not trying to induce metabolic fatigue by hitting the same muscle back to back to back. We want it to recover a little so that you can exert maximum effort on the next exercise in the rotation on a full body setup like this. So we're going to go with some sort of press next. And I'm going to go with the bench press, as again, the bench press is all around great upper body builder. Again, the focus is primarily on the chest, the anterior deltoids, and the triceps. but I mean, it works the entire shoulder girdle. It does work the lats and traps to some extent, at least as stabilizers. And again, if you can't develop a good chest off of flat bench, you probably don't know how to bench, and you need to go back and look at your technique. You need to look at your mind-muscle connection, because you probably don't know how to bench. So we're going to go with bench press for 5 sets of 5. All right, after that, again, the back has had time to recover, the legs have had time to recover, so we're going to want to do some sort of pulling movement. And I would recommend, generally for something like this, to go with something like barbell rows. Because again, you need some lat work, but again, we're trying to stick with movements that are going to stimulate the most growth. And a barbell row done heavily requires you to use a little leg drive, and it is effectively a full body movement, even though the primary movers are things like the lats and the traps. And we will do that for 5 sets of 5. We pretty well covered the basics at this point, and all of the major muscle groups have received at least some stimulation. And normally for a novice level trainee, this would probably be enough to get the job done. But for an intermediate, we're going to want a little more volume in here. We're going to want to hit things, again, a bit harder. So I would say at this point, we need some other type of pressing movement. And I would recommend, because again, this person has issues with their delts. We've said that we're going to design this routine for an intermediate who maybe has upper chest, biceps, and the medial head of their delt lagging a little bit. So we're going to want to go with some sort of press. And again, we want to stick with something very efficient, because we're trying to get a lot of work done and move a lot of weight for the entire body. So we're going to go with a standing press, which is oftentimes just referred to as a press. And again, this is done with a barbell, full range of motion. If you're not touching the chest on every rep, you're not doing it correctly. And that will be done for 5 sets of 5. And again, after that, because again, all of your pressing muscles are pretty fatigued, you're going to want to do some sort of pull again. And at this point, I would recommend something like shrugs be added in for your next pulling type movement. And even though the primary mover in the shrug is considered to be the trap, you tend to go very, very heavy on a barbell shrug. And so, again, it tends to work a lot of stabilizers. It tends to work the rest of the back, even the lats, the entire shoulder girdle to some extent, the core. So we're going to go with shrugs. For 5 sets of 5. Now after this, I mean, we pretty well have hit all of the major muscle groups very, very effectively. We've done all of our heavy work, but we're going to want to do a little bit of accessory work. We're going to need some arm work in here. And so again, I'm going to recommend that we do something for triceps and something for biceps. And again, since this is going to be a heavy, heavy workload day, compound base for triceps, we want to go ahead and pick a compound movement for our triceps. And so I would recommend closed grip bench press or weighted dips. But most likely, again, I would recommend the closed grip bench press on this day. And on this, we don't need to go with the 5x5s anymore. We're doing this all as accessory work. And I would recommend, again, to cut the time a little shorter, doing 3 sets of 8. Which again, we're getting more towards what's considered to be traditional hypertrophy phase, but as I explained in the 5x5 lecture earlier this week, there really is no true hypertrophy range. But we're going to go with that for this closed grip bench press. And again, that's given us, again, some more heavy tricep focus, even though we have 13 total sets of presses. So I mean, our triceps are pretty well shot. Our shoulders are pretty well shot from that. And then we're going to want to add some sort of curl. And again, for curling, this really is going to come down to individual preference, what seems to work for you. And I would recommend some sort of dumbbell curl, because again, if you have someone who has lagging biceps or have balance issues with their biceps, you want something that lets them get some sort of a deeper stretch on it than you can get with a barbell. I would recommend either alternating dumbbell curls where you supinate and pronate the wrist, or even incline curls so that you can try to engage a myostatic reflex at the bottom. So, and I would personally, again, with someone with lagging biceps, I would lean more towards the incline curl. because again, even though there's again supination and pronation of the wrist to help with the standing alternating curl, I mean the hammer grip has been worked to quite an extent on the heavy bent over rows. So again, I'd go incline curl. Also for 3 sets of 8. And then obviously I would do some sort of ab work or core work. And again, I would leave that to the individual towards their individual goals and what they tend to feel, but I would make sure that I do core work at the end of this. And possibly some calf work, forearm work, whatever you seem to need on that, but I'm not going to prescribe something, for this particular trainee on that. I would leave that for their personal preference. Again, they don't need a perfectly balanced physique. This isn't someone who's prepping for a bodybuilding show. They just want all-around general hypertrophy and decent muscle balance. All right, Wednesday, what we're going to do, we're going to scale the volume back a little bit. It's still going to be a very heavy day. It's going to be a 5x5 day, but we're going to want to incorporate deadlifts on this day. And, again, it's a tremendous mass builder, but in my opinion, a drug-free trainee shouldn't really be deadlifting more than once a week unless they really, really know what they're doing. So particularly deadlifting heavy. So again, the volume and frequency is going to be very low for the deadlift for us, but again, it is a tremendous mass builder. But again, we're going to lead with squats, and the reason for that being, even though the deadlift is a more difficult lift, you don't want your lower back fatigued when you're trying to do a deadlift, or when you're trying to do a squat. So we're going to want to squat first. So again, the squats are going to be 5x5. All right. And so we'll do that first, and then we'll go into the deadlift after you've done 5 sets of 5 on squats. And again, for those wondering if you can squat and deadlift in the same day, absolutely. And if it's difficult at first, you will condition yourself to it. I mean, I know I personally, since I've been training again for a year, my personal deadlift best has been 545 pounds, and I did that after doing a 3x3 with 90% of my max on box squats immediately before, and I still managed to hit my PR for the year. So again, we're going to deadlift, but on the deadlift, we're only going to do one heavy all-out set. And again, you're going to want to do a couple of warm-up sets first, even though you're fairly warm from the squats. So I mean, I might do a couple sets of 5 to warm up, or recommend that. And then do one all-out set of 5 reps, with a weight that's going to make you fail around rep 5. So we're going to go 1x5. All right, after that, some of it's going to be similar. We're going to jump back. We're going to bench press again. And again, and this is going to be what I would generally recommend, unless you're someone who just can't bench press correctly, you can't stand the bench press, you struggle with it, you might want to substitute dips in for it. But again, unless there's a reason not to bench press, as a general rule, you should be bench pressing for all-around mass. And again, we're not really addressing yet the problem with the upper pecs, because the upper pecs are getting worked quite a bit. If you're bench pressing correctly, they are getting worked. And then all of your standing presses, again, if you come all the way down and you touch your chest correctly on a barbell standing press before you press up, you're going to work your upper pecs to a large extent. But we're going to really address that weakness on Friday. And so then next, again, I would say do barbell rows for 5 sets of 5 again. So you would do that, and then I would jump back, and again, I would do the standing press again on this day. But again, you're going to be pretty fatigued from the deadlift, and this is going to be a lower volume day. So again, on the standing press, I might only prescribe 3 sets of 8 for this. And honestly, at this point, I wouldn't do any other heavy compounds, because again, you've done 5 compound movements already. You've deadlifted as one of those. Generally, on a day like this, you're not going to have, as an intermediate, you're not going to have enough exercise tolerance to handle much more volume. So again, I would recommend just isolation movements at this point for some of your weak points. And what I would consider at this point is maybe skull crushers. But I would even do the bicep work first, because again, this is someone with lagging biceps. So again, I would do again the incline curls for 3 sets of 8. And then I would do something like skull crushers. But what I would do is, again, a skull crusher with shoulder extension, so that you recruit the long head a bit more, which again is for people who do a lot of other pressing. The long head, if you're doing presses as your primary mass builder, the long head can tend to lag a little bit on the tricep, and it's oftentimes called the lazy head because it's not always recruited as effectively on presses. So again, doing skull crushers or movement in that way to recruit it is going to be very beneficial, and this is a good day to add this in, would be on your Wednesday. So again, we'll go skull crushers for 3 sets of 8. And then again, do some sort of abs and call it a day. All right, again on a routine like this, because we haven't addressed metabolic fatigue, and even though you don't necessarily need metabolically fatiguing workouts to induce maximum hypertrophy, they do induce very, very good hypertrophy, and they're, for many purposes at least equal to the 5x5 for inducing tissue hypertrophy like myofibrillar growth and, sarcoplasmic growth. But what they do is they give you that extra glycogen storage and other storage factors, triglyceride storage, help with capillary beds. So again, someone seeking overall size, we do need to address some metabolic work. And so since we've had 2 heavy days of 5x5, we're going to use the Friday as a lighter day. And this is what I would recommend for someone at this level with these goals. And we're going to use it as a weak point training day. We're going to put some extra emphasis on some of these weak points. So again, I would say on the Friday, and then because you'll have the entire weekend to rest, grow, and recover. And because again, this metabolically fatiguing is going to burn more calories. It is going to be more metabolically taxing on the body, even though it's less taxing on the central nervous system. So again, having the weekend to rest and recuperate can be a wise idea. So rather than do the barbell squat, because again, I find that for a lot of people who've done heavy squats twice in a week, that metabolic barbell squats can sometimes be problematic. And again, we've done them heavy twice, and this will allow us a little more diversity and a little more energy to put into other lifts. So I would say on Friday, I would have generally a trainee start with front squats. And again, unless they've got a reason why they need to do squats 3 times a week. Because again, maybe they're powerlifting or something on the side. But again, this routine isn't particularly appropriate for a powerlifter. So again, purely for aesthetics and hypertrophy, I would go ahead and swap out the squat with a front squat on Friday. And I would do 5 sets of 10. Which is going to end up being 50 total reps. That's a lot of workload. That's a lot of metabolic fatigue. And on this Friday, what you're going to want to do is keep the breaks relatively short. Most of these lifts I would recommend working with around 70% intensity, which, again, take as longer breaks as you need to be able to repeat your 10 rep sets with 70% of your max. But you want to keep the breaks relatively short to make sure you're inducing enough metabolic fatigue. So I would do that. Normally, for someone who doesn't have a lagging upper chest, I would have them possibly do bench press a 3rd time. But I would say for someone who's, again, got a lagging upper chest, which is, again, fairly common for natural trainees to have an upper chest that lags a bit. So, again, we're going to want to specialize a bit, drop the bench press, and maybe do incline barbell, or better yet, incline dumbbell. Because, again, someone who has a lagging upper chest, I generally find that the incline dumbbell press is one of the best fixes. So we're going to do incline dumbbell press for 5 sets of 10. Again, you're going to want some sort of pulling movement again next. You could just as easily do, your same barbell rows you've been doing, or, even weighted pull-ups or something. But I personally would lean towards the barbell rows, but any good pulling movement will suffice. But I'm just going to write the bore on there, the bent over row, for 5 sets of 10. Again, after that, we're going to want to address the delts again. So I would recommend a standing press for 5 by 10. But you could just as easily on that swap that out for a dumbbell press, a seated dumbbell press for 5 sets of 10. Again, if that would be someone's preference on that day. Again, the main thing is just getting a press in at this point for the metabolic work for their delts. And I would say, again, someone who doesn't have an issue with their traps, there's no need for us to do shrugs on this day because the traps are getting work with these other movements. We have the heavy shrugs here, we have heavy deadlifts there. The rows and the overhead presses do work the traps. So again, someone without lagging traps, I probably wouldn't have them do any real direct trap work on this day. But what I would do next, and what I would really look at is, since we've covered 4 basic compound movements, I would go ahead and add something like good mornings in to make sure that the whole posterior chain and hamstrings get worked correctly. So again, I would go with GM, good mornings, for 5 sets of 5, or 5 sets of 10, or even 3 to 5 sets of 10. We don't necessarily need to get 5 sets on all this accessory work. So I would do that. And then I would go ahead and break down and do some isolation work for everything. I would probably consider, again, someone with a lagging chest, possibly either flies or incline flies. Let's go ahead and go with dumbbell incline flies. For 3 sets of 10. I would probably do side lateral raises for 3 sets of 10. For, again, this is someone with a lagging medial head. I would probably incorporate some face pulls to make sure that their delts get worked completely, and again, that will pick up any of the rear delt and track that we've missed for the day. I would definitely address bicep work, and on this I would go ahead and do 5 sets of 10 on this, and then again some sort of curl. Some sort of dumbbell curl, and at this point on this day, just get the volume in. I don't care if it's a concentration curl, an incline curl, alternating dumbbell curls. Just make sure you get 5 sets of 10 in on a curl on this day if you have lagging biceps. And if not, go ahead and cut down to 3 because that gives you 9 total sets of curls for the week, in addition to 15 sets of rows. So I mean, your biceps have gotten pretty well trashed. So we'll even call it 3 to 5 sets of 10. I would again do some extra tricep long head work on this day. So again, some sort of behind the head press that puts a stretch on it with a dumbbell, with a cable. Again, 1 arm, 2 arm, comes down to personal preference. I personally prefer the 1 arm dumbbell behind the head press. I'm sorry, behind the head dumbbell extension. And I would only do 3 sets of 10 on that. And then I would do abs. Again, some sort of ab work again. And I mean, and that is basically how I would break down a routine and try to set up a routine for someone in that position, that level of experience, being an intermediate who can no longer grow off of straight linear progression. They've built up an exercise tolerance, they have a good strength base, and they're looking to gain a lot of size and stay on a 3-day-a-week full body routine. And I would set up something like this, again, to address those different weak points, to give you 2 heavy 5x5 days for maximum hypertrophy, and then a metabolic fatiguing workout to make sure that you get all of those storage factors and the muscles pump up well and hold more glycogen. And that's how I would go about it, particularly making sure that heaviest high volume, heavy day is on Monday after you've rested, and do something like the metabolic work on the Friday, so that you have the 2 days for the weekend to fully recover from all of that metabolic work before you go into all of this heavy work on Monday. And that's pretty much all I have for you today on that. This has been a very long video. Thank you for bearing with me, and I will put all of this up in the credits at the end. Let me give you guys another bicep shot. And I'll talk to you next time.